It's Saturday, February the 11th, 2023. I'm kind of in full production mode here now, which makes me feel really good. February 11th, and I've been waylaid and delayed for many weeks, and the anxiety keeps going up every day. But we're making progress here. So what I've done is I've cut my 1x8s to the length of a runner, and then I've ripped off one width of a runner. And a runner is defined by length more than width. The exact width of a runner, it doesn't matter as long as it's wide enough, and you don't want it too wide to waste material. If I was just making a few pallets, I'd just buy 1x4s. 3.5 inch runner is perfect. It's nice and wide. You don't really need more than that. If you get them too wide, pallets could wobble. So what I've calculated here is I'm making the runners just under 3.25 wide, 3 3/16 thereabouts. So I'll cut one of those off of the 1x8 and then set the offcut aside. And what I do then is I'll cut a 1/2 inch shim off the edge of this runner piece. It's an offcut at this point, but I'll cut that off, and so then I'm left with a nice 1/2 inch shim that I can use for my covers, and a runner that's right around 3.25, 3 3/16, that area. And again, it doesn't matter exactly, that's not a precision cut. Precision cut is in the 1/2 inch. So that's why I'll do a bunch, cut them to 3 3/16, set them on this side, and then I'll reset the saw to 1/2 inch and then run these through again to create those shims. And what's left over is then the other runner. And again, it doesn't matter exactly how wide that is, because material like this, you get a wide board like this, it's going to be different dimension side to side every day as it changes size with humidity. So I want to get that 1/2 inch shim, as exact 1/2 inch as I can. And the wood isn't going to change dimension as much if it's only 1/2 inch. It's going to be, pretty stable in there. And how much this changes in width doesn't matter. So that's what we're doing here. And I've got my lovely assistant here to help me, because then I can run these through and she can catch them at the tail of the table saw here. And it just makes the job so much faster. So we did a bunch yesterday. There's a whole bunch of rear shims for the pallets, and then you can't even see them, but that whole pallet has got one layer 10 high of runners for the pallets. So the idea here is to cut the large pieces first. So cut the runners first. If I can make offcuts I can use, perfect. And then I start cutting the next largest piece, which will be probably the 2-inch divider that sits on the top of the pallet. I call that the center shim. So that's the next largest piece. And the side shims are among the next largest pieces because they're the next longest pieces. That's how how I define large, is how long it is. So anyway, I'm going to stop rambling about that and we're going to get to work here. So have a great day. Thanks for watching and have fun. It's Monday, February 13th, 2023. Today is the day to start cutting the cover pieces to length on my big project for building this year. And I've got a situation here where my saw isn't quite long enough. It doesn't have as much travel as I need to actually cut that off. I'm short by about 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches. So what I did last year, and it worked out really great, and it might kind of look sketchy, but it seemed to be pretty safe, is I just clamped some stock to the table here, and so I could bring this side of the plywood up higher, and therefore the blade will protrude through the plywood. At that point, I'll just demonstrate that on this one. my stop system is set for an accurate cut. I usually will cut these a tiny bit oversized, 1/8 of an inch or so, and then run them through the table saw for an accurate sizing. However, the stop system is actually pretty accurate, so I've set it up to make an accurate cut, and that it is. So that's job 1 today. And let's see, Monday, that's really what I'm going to be doing today, just slicing up plywood and getting more parts cut for my big build. Tomorrow's Bee Club meeting, and so I think I'm going to go to town and probably go to the city early, get some things done. Got a couple stops I need to make, and then go to the meeting in the evening. It's always nice to knock off a few things. With the price of fuel, you want to maximize your impact. So that's really all I have to report today, and we'll put another entry in here tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Take care and have fun. It's Thursday, February 16th, 2023. I always kind of think of, the 16th as coming into the second half of a month. However, February is so short that we're a couple days into the second half of the month now, and I haven't got nearly enough work done. Pressure's on. So you can see that I've gotten quite a bit of work done. So a lot of my build parts are cut to, rip to width and whatnot at least. And my wife has been building frames again. I don't know how many she's got done. She's got a lot. So that's really nice. Really nice of her to do that for me. She comes out here and she'll build, 20 or 30 frames in the evening, and then we'll go in. So I was just working in the wood shop Monday, I think, as I remember. And Tuesday, I just did some things around here, and then I went to Winnipeg again. Did some deliveries and some errands, and went in the evening to our Bee Club meeting. And it was a stormy night. It was nice when I got there. About an hour before the meeting was to begin, a big storm came up, and high winds really, and it had snowed a bit, so the high winds then were blowing all the snow around, and you couldn't see to drive. So most of our out-of-town members didn't show up, and I don't know what the final tally was, but there was only about 20 people there. And one of the people that didn't show up because they were kind of snowed in was my tech guy. So we didn't have any of our tech. All we had was a laptop. So we all gathered around in a tight circle, and our presenter did his presentation, holding the laptop, showing the slides and whatnot. We attempted a Zoom, collaboration for those who couldn't make it. I don't think that worked very well. We didn't have any sound systems. We didn't have any microphones or anything. I just used my smartphone. I had to have my smartphone right in front of the guy to hear what he was saying. So, but we all had fun. We had coffee. We visited. It's just part of being living in Manitoba. Stuff like that happens. So it was a good start. It was my very first meeting as president. So, it was a good start to my tenure as president. But that's the weather. You hope for better, but that's the weather. What are you going to do? So we're going to actually do that presentation via Zoom so that we can record it for the membership, because it's a very interesting presentation. It's on the the hobbyist perspective of honey production and honey pricing, etc. The gentleman that did it is in the financial business, so it's very good with the numbers and the costs and everything. So it's pretty interesting what he presented. So Wednesday, wood shop. I worked all day in the wood shop Wednesday. I did get a lot done, but I need to get a lot more done. I'm running out of material, so I'm actually working on my offcuts, etc. And while that's profitable, it's very time consuming. If you take new lumber and you cut it up into parts, you can do that in a few minutes. Offcuts, you got to figure out what you can make out of it. Sometimes you have to cut it 4 or 5 times to get the yield out of that piece that you know, that it will provide. So anyway, very, very time consuming, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm working with some offcuts. So I'll show you a little bit about what I'm doing here. I'm starting off with an offcut that's it's actually 7/8 wide material. So it's interesting how you get familiar enough with lumber. I can spot a 7/8 material, you know, at 100 paces, but over a 3/4, and it's just an 1/8 of an inch difference. It's not that much. So what I'm doing for a customer is he has a bunch of 6-frame flat covers for his 6-frame nukes. And what I mean by a flat cover and how that differs from my migratory cover, I have one of my migratory covers here. So you can kind of see how that's constructed, okay? Sits on the box that way. He does want his a little different than this in dimensions. He likes to have a little more beef here, 1/4 of an inch more. And he likes to have a little more distance between the cleats here, just so it doesn't hug the box quite as close. So what he's got is he's got this same cover without the top cleat, without the end cleat. Okay, so what it is this piece of plywood is as long as the box. So even adding a cleat on the end of that might be pretty tight. He likes to have about an 1/8. The box is 20 and an 1/8, and so he likes to have about 20 and a 1/4 overall between the cleats. So I thought about that, and I thought about that, and what I came up with is, see, you got to make that box cover a little bit longer. And so what I came up with was to use the 7/8 material, and I have whack of these 7/8 offcuts that I'm using. So I'll cut that offcut to 2 1/4 wide, and then it becomes this wide. So I'm only cutting, you know, cutting that much off. So then what I'm doing, because we normally use 3/4 inch material for this, then I'm standing this in my table saw, and I'm cutting a notch here. So then this part will be the part that interfaces with the cover that he has, because it's a 3/4 cover with a 1/2 inch shim, so that's 1 1/4 inches, and then he'll have an inch of drop down the end of the box. So that's what I'm doing here right now. I'm just trying to do all these little jobs because I run out of lumber and I need to go to the store and get more, but I don't know exactly how much more because of this kind of thing. So I want to leverage my offcuts as much as I can. Lumber is so precious that, you know, I really need to. And you may hear my tractor running outside. I left it outside last night with the block heater plugged in. I don't normally do that, but the shop is getting pretty full. It was minus 31 last night, and the little tractor started up just fine. So I think we're okay that way. So yeah, that's what we're going to end up with. He's going to put that on his cover like that. I'm going to cut him some 2-inch top shims, and then he can just butt joint that end shim right on there. Cleats, I call these cleats, not shims. I call these shims. So I'll make 2-inch top cleats and these fancy end cleats, and that should work for him, I'm thinking. So I'm using my dado blade for this because this ended up, my rip blade, besides not making a really nice square corner like that, it's not quite 1/8, and it was leaving a little skin hanging over. So I put the dado blade in here, and that fixes those two problems. It makes a nice sharp corner in there, and it's a 1/4 of an inch wide, so there's overhang here. So I'm using my feather board to make sure that's nice and tight to the fence because I have exactly 3/4 of an inch from the dado blade to the fence. That goes through, and it ends up just like a 3/4 inch end cleat wood. Let's do a few of those and I'll show you. Well, that's 30. I need 600 of those. So I got enough work to do for now. I don't know how many offcuts I have. They're sitting over here. I don't know if you can see them. They're over there. So I'll have to see how many offcuts I have and then go from there. We'll see how many we can make. Anyway, that's all for this Thursday. Oh, the other thing, here's one other thing that I can work on. I meant to do some of this yesterday, but see these pieces of plywood here. These are the offcuts from my 10 frame covers, and so they're the width of a cover. They're just not as long. So I just need to take these and do my stitching process, put those together, and I can make a whack more covers. Probably about half that many. Probably more than half that many, but you know, if I do 2 per cover, then I'll make half that many covers, because this is more than half of one cover. I don't know how many are there. There's 10, 20, 30, 40. I think there's 40 there, so I'll make 20 covers out of that. So it's a good place to be on a cold day. It's, I don't know, it's in the -20s right now. Tomorrow we're going to warm up real nice, so that's, but then it'll get cold again. So we get one day of, I think they were saying like 0. So it's kind of weird that it just goes right to 0 and then it goes back down to cold right away. So I've got to clean up the shop. I need to get some of the finished material out so I can get some more raw material in. Finished material doesn't have to sit in the shop. It can, you know, sit in cold storage, or I don't know, even outside sometimes, I guess. But I don't like to leave things outside too much. It gets snowed on, it gets wet. And that's about it for now. So I'll probably talk to you on Friday, but I'll likely be doing about the same thing on Friday. And so anyway, for today, take care and have fun. This is a good example of demonstrating this flip-stop system. So in previous videos I installed this Craig track and stop system. They have what they call production stop here. It's fixed, so these slide along this rail, and there's a tape and a red line to make the cuts accurately. And so this is a fixed stop. This one is fixed as well, but it flips up. Okay, so I can flip that up to use this stop, or by virtue of the shape, I can push material in under it like that. And why that's important is, you can see this piece I'm using. I need to square one end, and then I need to cut it to length. So what I do is I can push that under the flip stop, square the end, and when I do that, I try to put my good end over here, so that when I turn it around, use the flip stop, then I'm cutting the bad end off. So I'll just demonstrate that. I'll cut the pieces and then, then I decide to cull them or not. It's Friday, TGIF, the 17th of February, 2023. And truck's in the garage, so you know what's going on. Yeah, fixing on my 17-year-old truck. And when I'm done fixing on the 17-year-old truck, I need to get the 25-year-old truck in here, finish the brake job. So what's going on here is it's all good. This is the one I had the fuel pump replaced, I don't know, a month ago. And I've noticed that the block heater apparently doesn't work. And usually that's a cord situation, but I came prepared. Here's a little story on this. This is a genuine Cummins block heater, pretty standard fare. And I bought this probably 12 years ago because I had a 1998 Dodge Cummins powered 1-ton, and same problem, block heater didn't work. So I bought a new block heater for it, and I realized it was just the cord. So I have this one left over, and because even though this is a 2006 truck, so it's 8 years later, it still has the 5.9 liter Cummins turbo diesel engine. And so I am prepared if I determine that the block heater is bad. I sure hope it isn't, because I have to drain coolant and everything at that point if the block heater is actually bad. I'm hoping it's just the cord, and that's going to be bad enough because I have to crawl up underneath to get the cord out. I just wanted to show you something. This is, and if you're brand loyal one way or the other, that's fine, but the difference between an industrial designed engine and kind of a consumer designed engine, and I know there's a manufacturer calls their stuff professional grade and all that, and that's kind of nonsense. But if you know how block heaters go in, and people in the southern climates, don't deal with block heaters. I know what happens is engines are not really designed to have block heaters from the factory. At least they haven't been. Maybe the last few years, I'm not up to date on everything that's going on in the last 5 or 10 years perhaps. But what happens is there's what's called a freeze plug on the side of the engine block, and you take that freeze plug out and you put the block heater in that plug, and it has an O-ring and a little gadget behind it that pulls it into the plug, but it's just kind of a press fit in there. An industrial designed engine, that thing actually threads in there. It's got thread locker on it, and it seals up tight when you put it in. Not only that, but the cord actually threads on. So you've got a couple of conductors in there, and the cord will thread right onto that. So positive lock. And the others, I think they mostly just push in with 3 conductors. This has 3 conductors, but the third is a ground on the cord, so it just grounds to the body. So I thought that was really interesting. It kind of goes along with the situation when after I bought this truck, I think it was 2012 I bought this truck, the water pump went bad, which is, kind of run-of-the-mill for any engine. But I bought a new water pump, and I got it in a little box. I thought, wow, that's not much of a pump, because particularly on like a V6, V8 engine, the water pumps are pretty involved. They're kind of make up most of the front of the engine in some cases. I know one buddy was telling me recently he had what do you have, a V6 or V8? And oh yeah, it was the Duramax. So it was a comparable, type of engine. But that's a Japanese Isuzu design, and you have to take like the timing cover and the timing chain and everything, or timing belt, or I don't know if it's a chain or a belt, probably a belt, chain on that engine. But huge job, and it was really funny when I replaced the water pump on this engine. I was kind of worried because there's not much clearance here between the radiator and the engine, but you reach down in there, you pull back the tensioner, flip the belt off. There's one 10 millimeter bolt. You spin that 10 millimeter bolt out. Of course, you have to drain the fluid, at least down that far, and it's fairly high on the engine. And you pull that water pump out, and instead of a gasket, gaskets are crap. They leak a lot, and they depend on a lot of other factors to actually make them work. It actually got a nice O-ring in there. So I got my new water pump, and it has a brand new O-ring on it, and stuffed it in the hole, put the 10 millimeter back in, flipped the belt on. It was literally 10 minutes in one hand and one bolt to change that water pump. I was really happy because I wasn't really looking forward to messing with a big diesel engine. It's not that big. It's a 360 cubic inch, but regardless, it was really a nice surprise that was so easy. So even if I need to change this block heater, it's not, put it in a freeze plug, make sure you got the thing all reamed out and clean so that the O-ring will seal, and make sure you screw it up tight and don't strip it and all that kind of stuff. It's threaded out, and thread the new one in. Bob's your uncle. I hope. That's the theory. So what I need to do is determine, is it the cord? And if it is the cord, then just replace that, which is going to be hard enough because it's kind of threaded down in there. Okay, so here's a quick little, bought myself a light. I realized I didn't have very good light for working under the truck. So, yeah, seems okay so far. A magnet on the bottom, it'll stick there. If you don't have a multimeter, get one. You can get a thing called a power probe too, a little pricey, but really cool device. So I'm going to put this on what's called a continuity test, or maybe not. Let's see. Okay, so there's my on switch. This switch will turn the audible beeper on. So you can see when I touch the two probes and I get what's called continuity, I get a little scream. So there's my block heater cord end. And if you know heater elements, they're basically a short circuit is why they get hot. And this will not apply to all vehicles. I know there's some newer GM vehicles that they have some circuitry involved that won't allow the block heater to turn on above a certain temperature. So if it's here in the shop, the engine was just running, so it's warm. This test probably won't work in that situation. I don't believe there's any circuitry like that involved here. So what I can do is put one probe on one side of that cord and the other probe on the other side. I have no continuity. Okay, so that tells me that there's something broken. Either the heater element's burned out or the cord is broken. So that's how I kind of determined. I suspected, because when you plug a vehicle in, when you plug the block heater in, you always hear a little snap because it's a fairly high wattage, a high current situation. So you hear that little snap. Sometimes you'll see a little bit of a spark there. And I was not hearing that. But I need to crawl under the truck. Follow this to where it goes and crawl under there. It's way down in there. All right. Anybody wants to do this for me, they are welcome. I'm not looking forward to this at all. Found the offending member here. It's right there. I don't know if I can get it without taking that oil filter off.
but I have to try. But I can't film and do that at the same time. I need to see if I can get my vice grip on it. It's a knurled nut and it's just too tight to do it with my fingers.
Okay, we may never know what's wrong. I could cut this cord off and test it, but there's no way that this ring is coming off of that block heater. I grabbed that hard with the vice grips. It's knurled, it's not even a nut, so you can't grab it with a wrench. So I grabbed it with vice grips and got it to turn, and the whole block heater spun out of the engine. Spun out of the engine. So I don't know if it's the heater or the cord, but we're getting a new heater and a new cord, so that better work. So I've got this set up here on my meter, and so I've got this terminal touching there, and that's all it's touching. It may look like it's touching something else, but it isn't. And if I touch this to that terminal, it should beep. Okay, so that's what I was looking for before. So you can see, even with your eyes, that this is a dead short circuit between the two sides. And that is why it beeps. You can actually, if you want to get technical, you can measure the resistance. Okay, so that's like 8 ohms. It changes as it. This is actually heating up a little bit from the battery. So now that it's as warm as it's going to be, we're looking at 12 ohms of resistance there. So that's a good secondary check. If I'm testing this on the front of the truck, I can test for continuity, but now that I know it's about 12 ohms, I can test that for actual proper resistance. And yeah, cut my finger. I don't know. I'm not surprised. This has not really been that easy a job. You can hear the truck. I'm draining the coolant because this block heater started coming out. I'm glad I noticed that before I got it out, or there would have been a big mess. So now I have to get up in there and put this back in. A little bit of a difficulty. This the original doesn't have an elbow here. This is a Temro cord, not a Cummins cord. This is a Cummins heater, and this ring, if you seat this all the way into the heater, you can't make the ring go on there straight because it interferes here. So you have to push this in partially, then get the ring started or threaded on, and use the ring, I guess, to pull the connector in. A little bit of a design flaw in my opinion, but it is what it is. So I need to put this in first, get that nice and snug. You see there's some thread sealant, I believe that. I don't think it's thread locker, it's thread sealant. You can see on the original in there, and it's it's an 1 1/8 fastener on there. Turn this off. So I gotta use that big wrench to put that in there nice and snug, and then hook up that cord and thread it up to the top. Okay, there's the new shiny parts. Right there. All installed. I'll just route the cable and then gonna pour the fluid back in this big engine. Well, I was hoping to not have to change that heater, but I ended up changing the heater. Only because I couldn't get the cord off of the old heater. And I know I got dirt all over my face. That's what happens when you're under a truck. Stuff fall on your face the whole time. So anyway, truck's got a new block heater cord, and I just have to pour the coolant back in. I'm gonna wear these gloves just because my hands are dirty. Yeah, I could go and wash my hands, but it's easier just to put gloves on. And it's a nice clean pail. I got a nice clean pail for the for the coolant because I wanted to reuse it. Typically I don't really reuse coolant. Special coolant in this truck, it's really expensive. And it looks really nice, so I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's clean, and it looks like it's in good condition. And I'm hoping I can pour it in that little funnel without making a mess. You'll have a front row seat if I do. It's about 20 bucks a gallon for this stuff. Of course, 20 bucks a gallon, but it's half water, so there's 20 bucks for the part that's not water. 10 bucks a gallon. Net. My back is suffering from this job. Not just the pail either. Suffering from rolling around on the floor underneath an old truck. So I'm really praying that the new block heater doesn't leak. They torqued it pretty good. It's an 1.125" fastener. There are nut hex on it. It was hard to swing the wrench in there. I actually got some pretty good swing on the wrench. I was kind of wanting for a stubby combination wrench. It wasn't quite so long. Now, if I get an airlock, it'll just overflow. I see in there's a little piece of something or other in there, and I don't want it to go down the hole. Okay, that's good. So we'll leave it at that. Pick up some fluid in town. Park the truck outside for now. And bring the other truck in and do a brake job. Stick around. Here's a little bit of Canadiana. Now while it's in the shop, I put cardboard in front of the radiator. And typically I'll put 2 pieces so that if I need to open up a little bit on the road, get a warm day, that kind of thing. This engine stays cool real easily, so it's not such a big deal. Just as a matter of course, I'll put 2 pieces, and then I can just adjust that on the fly. Now, this truck doesn't have anything under the cardboard to support it, so what I do is I'll leave a flap, and then the hood will just trap that when I close it, and that will work just fine. So anyway, a lot of people in a warmer climate might not really have seen that, putting cardboard in front of your radiator. Keep the thing warm, especially this, diesel engine doesn't produce much heat. It consumes heat. So, they need some help to stay warm. And it's really hard on them if you run them cold. So that's your lesson in keeping your engine warm. Okay, I got the truck on the jack stand here. And normally, here's a commentary about jack stand. Normally, if I was just changing a tire, or maybe even doing a quick brake job, I might not bother with the jack stand because I'm not under the vehicle. Jack stand's always a good idea because the vehicle is more stable on a jack stand than it is on its own wheels. It doesn't move at all. And because I'm going to be here a while, jacks tend to kind of seep down a bit. And so that's the skinny on the jack stand. Now I'm going to try and show you this. So you can see the linings are, they're getting down. Not too bad yet. The inner lining is always less than the outer one, because if you think about physics, what happens here is this piston, this is the piston, it pushes against this lining, which puts pressure on the rotor, and then it's the piston is mounted in the caliper. So because the caliper is one piece, then because this is pushing against this rotor, the caliper then slides back and pushes on this pad. So there's always going to be more pressure on this one, because the pressure on this one is equal to the pressure on this one minus the amount of pressure it takes to slide the caliper back. And then that'll equal the pressure on that one and what's left. So there's always going to be less pressure on the outside. And the root of my problem is right here. That's a broken bleeder screw. So that's the root of my problem. So these are a giant hex, like an Allen key thing. Oh boy, I hope I have a wrench like that. And so I need to take, what do I need to do? I think I need to take those off. I need to take that brake line off. And as we discussed, that's a brake hose. Take that off. That caliper's got to come off. I have new linings and new calipers to put on. This is a slide. This is the bracket that the caliper sits in. So this slides back and forth in here. And so this mating surface needs to be very, very clean and, clean and easy to slide. If your brakes are uneven, your vehicle pulls one side to the other when you brake. It could be that they're not sliding well on this. You can also have locked up pistons as well. So that's the job. Okay, I don't know how well you're going to see this, but that appears to be a 3/8. You know what? The new caliper has a 3/8 Allen head. Oh, I guess that one does. Maybe that's full of dirt. I don't know. Goofy if you ask me. And it's loose. Yeah, I wouldn't have chose those kind of fasteners. I wonder what their reasoning is. I mean, they're about the most positive locking system you can get. Far better than a hex bolt. However, they're going to get full of crap here. Okay, let me take that little brake line off there. I often forget that, and then I have to try to take it off. When the caliper is loose, right? These are often called a banjo system. I'll show you that. So it's got a little fitting like that, and I know you can't see what's in there, but in there is there's a groove around that. Actually, I don't think there's a groove around that one. There's a groove around the bolt in this one. Sometimes they're made differently. And you see there's a hole in that bolt there, and there's a hole down the middle of it. So the brake fluid goes around the outside of it here and makes its way into the caliper that way. Generally, I get a new banjo bolt with the new caliper. I'm just going to tuck this up in here. But we'll see. I've got the new one here, but I'll have to see what they've given me. Disc brakes are so much easier to service than drum brakes. And by 1 ton, it's a little different. The 1 ton's a nicer system, less less chance of hanging up and failure. It's just a heavier duty truck and less room for error when you're dealing with, you know, flying down the highway with 20,000 pounds behind you or something. Okay, so there you go. The old caliper linings and everything came off. That's awesome. If I was changing the rotor, I would do that at this time. I might like to change that rotor, but I don't have them, so I'm not going to change them. I don't think that's going to hurt my new linings at all. Oh, this is dripping brake fluid everywhere. Oh, what a mess. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. That's the inside one. I want to look at that pad. It's kind of weird. Little clips that hold them in. Yeah, there's some kind of a difference here on the outside of the rotor. You could see where it was running there. I don't really know. I don't know what's going on there. I probably should get some new rotors for this before long. So what I need to do is just kind of clean this. I'll get some emery cloth. I'll clean that up real nice. I need my new linings anyway. I'm just going to clean this with a file. Should have gone to the other parts store. I went to my normal parts store. They didn't have rotors for me. I should have gone around the corner to the competition. Because now I got to do this again to change the rotor. I got to take the bolts off. And the only thing I don't need to do is pull that brake line and bleed the system when I'm done. You see, they're very easy to change at this point. On the 1 ton, this whole bracket was part of the assembly, which was really nice. This one is put together differently. This is a lot more involved with the knuckle of the wheel. It's interesting how many variations they have for different different capacity vehicles. That's the new banjo bolt. These calipers, they get returned for rebuild. So I think it's $20 they give me for that when I bring it back. You do not want to get brake fluid on the linings or on the rotors. The linings will absorb it. If you get it on the rotor, you need to use something called brake clean. Clean that thing off really good. It gave me a little bit of lube here. And the instructions say apply to all sliding surfaces. Like that. Like that. There's not very much. Came with the lining, so I need enough to do both sides. These are left and right. The linings are not. You buy them in pairs. There's inner and outer, but not left and right. So for this, I'm trying to get you so you can see most of it. You just got to watch the curvature of, your wheel. And that just kind of sits in there like that. This one needs to kind of slide over that, like so. Pry with a file. Should never pry with a file. Okay. If you ask, this is called a semi-loaded caliper. If you buy a loaded caliper at the store, it comes with these linings in it. A loaded caliper is nice. I could have bought a loaded caliper, but this is what they had. Okay, slide this in here. It's a new caliper, so the piston should be all the way back. I don't think it'll. As you can see, it's not a rocket science job, which is nice. Especially after changing that block heater, that was a pain. Oh, I got oil under the mat. Okay. Click. Click. Okay, so I think I'm gonna need a plier. Maybe not. It's a little screw, it's not a plug. There's a stopper on the caliper here. Often they're a little plug. That's actually a plastic screw. And I got a hardware kit here with the linings, but I got all that new hardware with the caliper, so I don't really need that. Now my brake line. It's my new little banjo bolt here. So there's 2 washers. I don't think I'm bleeding. That was that bag. There's 2 washers, so there's 1 washer goes on, then the banjo bolt, and then the fitting, and then the other washer. So I can put that in here, put that washer on there, and then put it on the caliper. Click. All right, so that's in. I can reach this bleeder with the wheel on, so I think I'm good to put the wheel back on here. The new linings look good. Really wish there was a new rotor there, but that's not going to happen today. Here we go again. How can you tell I'm getting tired? Working on old trucks. I had a problem with the 1 ton. I did that brake job last year. And the reason I had to do that brake job is that the caliper on the driver's side here wasn't sliding back. The piston wasn't sliding back. And it ran the brakes. And it just ruined everything. And so I changed everything from the brake hose. I changed calipers, linings, rotors, everything. And although the problem mostly dissipated, it didn't go away. And I was therefore at a bit of a loss as to why. So again, these linings are down, but they're not critical yet. So I was talking to my mechanic about it. I thought about that for a minute, and he said he changed that brake hose. I said, no, I didn't change the brake hose. He said, change that brake hose. I think that's your problem. And you know, he was right. He said what happens sometimes is he says this brake hose here, you can hardly see much of it, but this rubber hose, it can kind of separate. It's not just one piece. There's different layers to it. And he said the inside of it can deteriorate to a point where it collapses. And then he said the high pressure from applying the brakes will make it expand so you can push fluid through it. But then when you let your foot off the brake, then the hose collapses again and doesn't let the pressure back go to the caliper. And that's exactly what it felt like, because that's a check valve system. And that's exactly the way it felt. And, you know, by gum, I changed that brake hose. He actually changed it for me. He was in there for that fuel pump. So I said, change that brake hose. Yeah, he changed that brake hose, and the problem's gone. And it's sure nice to have a knowledgeable mechanic on your side, you know. And that's something that I kind of rant about. Get yourself a good mechanic, and I'm not talking at a dealer. Dealerships, ask them, do not get a mechanic that works for a flat rate shop. And the reason is that mechanic only makes money when he finds stuff wrong with your car. Okay? So that mechanic is vested in finding problems for you to pay for. And the mechanic doesn't, the shop doesn't pay the mechanic unless he finds stuff wrong with your car. So then you got 2 strikes against you there. Okay. I think this piston is a little bit pushed out, so that's going to be a problem. So what you need is a good independent mechanic. Someone you can trust, someone you can foster a relationship with, and foster that relationship. Don't complain about the bill every time. The guy's a skilled girl. They're a skilled tradesperson, and you need to pay for those skills. So don't just try to get something for nothing all the time. It bothers me when people try to, you know, always complaining about the mechanic bill. Pay your mechanic. Foster that relationship. When a mechanic gets to know you, here's an example. If I asked my mechanic to go do a brake job on my truck, that's all I'd have to say. And if he got in here and he saw a rotor like this, he'd replace it. If he saw a caliper that needed, he'd replace it. Because that's the relationship I have with him. He knows that I would replace the parts rather than do this job all over again, put a little bit of money into my truck, replace those parts while I'm in here. Because you're paying the guy labor. And you can pay him labor to put old parts on your vehicle or new parts. You choose. It's the same labor rate. So this is called a wear indicator. Not all brake pads have it. That's just there so that when that pad gets thin enough, that'll start to scrape on the rotor and make noise. You can hear that and you think, oh boy, something wrong with my brakes. You take that in your mechanic and they charge you a bunch of money putting the brakes in your car. It did fit. There we go. Okay. There. Yeah, years ago they used to have the bolts, the caliper slid on the bolts, and you always had seized up sliders. And now they got the slider is inside. It's kind of sealed so it doesn't corrode from the elements. That's sure a nice system. And I don't know, years ago I worked on much smaller vehicles, small import cars and things like that. Not trucks. Boy, trucks are a lot harder. They're just bigger and heavier and more obstinate. Sometimes little cars are put together kind of goofy, but they're not heavy. I mean, just snap off a lot of fasteners on a little car. Rusty. I'm very pleased with how easy these two Dodge trucks I have, how easy the brakes are to service. Pretty easy. Click. Click. Oh. That's why I was looking for a red bag. Okay, one washer on the bolt. Through the brake hose. Fitting. Next washer. I didn't turn this wheel quite all the way so that I'd have a little more slack in this fitting, but still don't have much. Just don't want to cross thread that. Boy, that would be terrible. Click. Okay. Other than bleeding the brakes, I'm done. Well, I put the wheel back on. Cutting's log.